If you show up as highly agreeable and highly conscientious, that's a recipe for getting walked on. Welcome to What to Say and How to Say It. I'm Nina.
And I'm shy.
And today we're going to be talking about 3 keys to becoming a respected person. This is a huge deal because if we are interacting with people and they don't respect us, then we have a huge problem with our influence. So we're going to talk about 3 keys today that'll help in that department. So Shy, I don't know about you, but I felt like I wasn't respected before. How about you?
Yes, for sure. It happens all the time.
I hate that, right? And it seems to happen in certain relationships more than others, I think.
Yes, you get to know people and you get to know their buttons. And so, yeah, we push those sometimes, and sometimes ours get pushed back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know how this works, but I feel like at work, you know, is easy to be respected, to show up as a respected person and behave in ways that cause respect. And then in some of my personal relationships, yeah, it just truth. I've botched that.
Same, same,
Yeah.
same.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I think when we're dealing with people at work, there is sort of a mask we put on, first of all. We know how to behave. Second of all, I think we're not as invested in those relationships as we are with those that are, in the same house, for instance, as us, or who, are really important to us, people we love dearly. So I think it's a little trickier when our heartstrings are involved.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And sometimes I don't have as much confidence in my relationship space as I do in my workspace. Like, I feel like I know what I'm doing. Not that I don't want to sound arrogant here, but I kind of know some stuff, right? And so I know how to swim in that lane. People that you're having intimate relationships with, like your kids and your spouse and your mother-in-law and it's different. It is really different.
Definitely. Yeah. It's like you go to school and they teach you how to do work stuff, or you go to training at work and they teach you how to do that, but nobody really, teaches you how to do the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And so much of it comes down to how do we show up, with our
Mhm.
boundaries, with our values. And I don't know about you, but in my parenting, sometimes I've made the big mistake of wanting to be my kid's friend instead of their parent. And so I've let them
Mhm.
push a few boundaries, like, when they were younger. I figured that out. So, and that was the only way we survived the teen years is, do what you say and say what you're going to do and, stick to that kind of thing. And so that helped. And I think at work, it's easier because here's the rules, here's the deadline, it's just a lot. There's not as much gray at work, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's the old, like you said, do as you say and say as you do. So I think with work, there's objectives. It's very clear. It's, these are your goals for the year, and that's what you strive for. So yeah.
I think most of us struggle with this from the get-go. Those of us that have had issues with it and relationships. I remember being in grade school. I think I was like 5th grade or something. And this girl comes up to me and she said, "So I have a bone to pick with you." And I was floored and terrified, right? All at the same time. And she said, "So somebody told me that you were saying that I like this boy and that we were dating, and that's not true. And I don't like you gossiping about me." And I
Mhm.
just kind of sat there and went, "Oh my word. Okay." And she goes, "So is it true?" And I said, "Yeah, I did that. And she goes, okay, so don't do it again. I was like, all right. And she was a friend of mine. And I don't know, the whole bad behavior on my part's a whole different story, right? But what's relevant here is I remember that moment because I was like, how did she do that? Like, how did she
Mm.
show up and just be, hey, this is what I heard. Is it true? And she wasn't angry. She was just very direct. And what's crazy is after that, she acted like nothing happened. I mean, she totally forgave me, I guess. And we went on nobody's business. It was just fine. But that moment stuck with me. And I think I really admired her for
Mm.
being able to do that. If you take the Big Five test, personality test, it's one of the most reliable, valid personality tests out there. Cross culturally, people show up the same. Okay. In these things, I love this thing, but basically, if you show up as highly agreeable and highly conscientious, that's a recipe for getting walked on.
Mm.
And that was me growing up. I could do things at work, and I'm in my 50s now. So growing up, I consider up through 35, I guess. But I could do stuff at work, but in my personal relationships, I did get walked on sometimes. And it was what you were saying earlier, the more important that relationship was, the harder it was for me to step into that space and not get walked on. That sound
Yeah.
relatable?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a skill some people develop earlier than others, and I fall into the camp where it didn't come early for me either. So for me, it's when I want, people that I respect or people that are in authority over me to respect me, where I find that to be sometimes difficult. And, you talk about being agreeable and highly conscientious. I feel like those are two things that I am. And so it would make sense that that would be a struggle for me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I like how Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about this. He's got a video out, and he speaks about how he coaches people that are highly conscientious and agreeable and getting walked on by doing assertiveness training with them. And when I heard that for the first time, I went, oh my word, this is what we do in Greater Impact. And I spent 15 years at Dale Carnegie doing the same thing with public speaking. That fear that we have, most people are afraid of speaking in public. And that's kind of like this whole, I'm going to get walked on thing on steroids, right? Because your heart's in your throat and it's pounding and you think you're going to die, but you still have to go do this thing. And we use, basically, it's not called this, but it's like that, prolonged exposure therapy, to help people get comfortable. We start with small stuff to build confidence. And we do this in Greater Impact in all of our courses. We help them do small things to build confidence, and then they're able to go step into those things. And it's the same thing that Dr. Peterson was talking about in the video on assertiveness training. He had a client that was afraid of elevators. And he's like, well, can you look at a picture of an elevator? Can we start here? And he got her to a place where she could walk up to an elevator and the jaws of death would open and close, and then finally get on and then be fine. Right. So you just kept doing that kind of stuff. And so, when it comes to this respect business, it's kind of the same thing. And I like to call it becoming bulletproof. That's like point number one, right? Become bulletproof. And that's not an easy thing. It's when we show up in a conversation, in a situation, we don't take it personally. We don't have any fear at all around it. And so getting to that space is kind of hard, but it's really important. And we don't even notice it when we are bulletproof because we don't have that negative experience. But then there's the other piece of it, which I know you wanted to talk about today. You have an example for us too.
I do. So bulletproof, when I think about that word, I think of it as the opposite of being triggered. I know a lot of us are like using that word a lot. And so most people know what that means. When you're triggered, it brings you to a place where you've had a traumatic experience or there's some heavy fear there. And, for me, I know one example that, recently happened to me where I had a friend that needed to meet me somewhere, and it was, to hand off a really important item. And the scheduling wasn't working well for me. I had a really busy day, but I needed to get this thing from her. And, this was a really good friend of mine. And so I was doing everything I could to make it work out. Well, we finally got to the meeting place, and, admittedly, I wasn't my best because I was in a hurry. And I think the exchange, just didn't go as well as it could have. Um, Later, she tells me, her feelings were hurt, and, all this stuff came at me. And because she's so important to me, I was triggered in that moment. And, there was an opportunity to certainly be bulletproof, but, again, like we talked about, when it's a close relationship, somebody that's dear to you, it's tough really to not take things personally. I felt, a need to defend myself in that moment. And
so what did you do? I mean, did you react to that, or did you like behave well? What happened?
yeah, so I was sort of kind of stopped in my tracks, so to speak. When her feelings came out, it just caused me to pause, which is how I know I was triggered. So I feel like I behaved maybe in the right way, but internally there was some stuff going on there, that maybe not would not have happened if it were like a colleague or someone, that I work with. Yeah.
Yeah, so the triggering was still there, but you behaved well. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's not bulletproof, because you had an awareness of, oh, this is not fun, and maybe hurt a little bit, but then you did the right thing, which is what we call white knuckling it, right?
Right.
You want to talk about that for a second?
So yeah, white knuckling I think is a great term for that, because we, like I said, we know how to put these masks on, and we know how to behave well. I think we learned that from childhood. And so I knew enough to know you can't react in a way that might be defensive or harmful or, negative in any way. So I defaulted to just being silent, knowing that at least if what's going on inside I can contain, then, the exchange might not go as bad as it otherwise would. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's a thing because, when we're triggered, our amygdala fires and we get fight, flight, or freeze response. And so that whole white knuckling thing where you behave properly, regardless of what you're feeling,
Mm-hmm.
that's actually, further down the road, because if you back the train up to when you're not behaving well, and that's because you're so triggered, your amygdala is firing off like crazy and you're shooting stuff back and you're so defensive, you're like, let me punch you in the face verbally. And so, this is part of that growth process. And at the end of it is this bulletproof space, so becoming
Mm-hmm.
bulletproof, how do you do that? Well, the awareness of our behaviors and the impact it has on other people, what God has to say about it, choosing to follow him instead of
Right.
the enemy, right? And
Right.
then making that white knuckle effort actually really helps with this. And then further down is, and we talk about this a lot. It's what do you do spiritually? Because in those places, we're, it's not a gentle answer turning away wrath. We're adding to the wrath, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or we're so silent that, we're not being truthful or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
so how do you navigate that is, you deal with the spiritual piece of it, which is those places where we're wounded or we believe lies or we have unforgiveness, all that kind of stuff. And I've had some serious spiritual healing in that. I know you have too. It makes a difference.
Absolutely. And it's so like automatic when you're in the moment. Most of us don't realize what lie we've believed, what wound we're operating from, uh, enough to know how to counteract that. We hear the scriptures that say, take every thought captive, renew your mind. Well, I've learned that really is a process that has to happen. It's not just, something you can just do with effort. I think it takes, a lot of work to get there. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's worth doing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you, but my mind is usually going. I mean, there's never a quiet space there. And some of that's because I'm female and that's how our brains work. They're different. When men, I've read studies on this stuff, and when men say, you ask them, what are you thinking of? And they say nothing, that's actually true. I don't even know what that's like.
Right?
I have no idea what that's about.
Nothing.
Yeah, nothing. Take the thoughts captive. It's like, that's all I do all day, right? And anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent, but what I was going to say is one of the most important things I learned probably about 15 years ago was from Dr. Marcus Warner of Deeper Walk International. And he's the dude that put together the Understanding the Wounded Heart book, which is one of the best resources out there in terms of getting to that place where you're healed in some spaces. And you can keep doing that book over and over again. But one thing he said that really shocked me and just kind of like, whoa, that's awesome, was he said, you have to understand that not all of your thoughts are your own. So
Wow.
Satan's planting that stuff. And it's usually condemnation, right?
Right.
Yeah. So on the way to becoming bulletproof, which is, the first key to becoming a respected person, because when we lose emotional control, nobody respects us when we do that.
Right.
And then when we let people walk all over us, we're not respected. Right. And so becoming bulletproof so you can engage in that stuff, that makes a huge difference. So you got to become bulletproof. That's point one. Point two is you got to actually know that you are.
Yeah.
And that, I don't know about you, but I forget that I am sometimes.
Depending on the situation and the person. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And for me, that shows up as I'm going to go have this conversation. I don't even think about it ahead of time. Mm-hmm. And then I get surprised in the middle of it. Mm-hmm. And then it goes haywire. And I've forgotten who I am in that moment. And this sounds so simple, but the biggest thing that's really helped me and the people we work with at Greater Impact is knowing ahead of time that you're going to go have a conversation and setting a good time for that, for the other person and for you, so that you actually increase the odds of it going well. But I forget to do that sometimes. And that's not me knowing that I'm bulletproof. It's me forgetting that I'm bulletproof. Because if you know that, then you act wiser, right?
For sure. Yeah. And part of it is like you said, just the awareness, that comes with becoming bulletproof. It's like, oh, wait, I know how to do this now. Let me remind myself. Sometimes I have to remind myself of what I have learned, what the Holy Spirit has done in me, before we have those conversations. Like, we've talked about the steps, and sometimes I got to do the steps before I enter into that conversation. Sometimes I have to pray, just to get centered, because it can go left if you're not in that awareness space. So, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's one of the reasons we have that rule. We coach our people into, adopting this rule, not to be bossy or anything, but that's never have a conversation when emotionally upset. When you're emotional, don't do it. Nothing good comes from that. So, and if it starts happening, take a break so that you act respectfully to yourself and to other people. So that's a huge thing. And I think all of that brings us to that third point, which is walking in the spirit. I think the easiest way to demonstrate this is with kids that are upset and tell you terrible things about you and you don't take it personally, right? Yeah. Like have you had situations like that with your people?
Oh, I think it actually happened earlier today. My oldest was getting the youngest, who's 4 and a toddler and doesn't care about time and schedules, and she's in her own world, and she just wouldn't cooperate. And she was just throwing things everywhere and bending over backwards, just being a toddler. And my oldest got so upset because she was very aware of the time constraint. And in that moment, I noticed her emotion. And because of, what God's done in me, I was able to really just sit with her in that moment and sort of help her, redirect her emotion and get control. So for sure, those skills have come in handy.
Well, and I think it's so much easier with kids. Your 4-year-old pounds on your legs because they're hangry, right?
Yeah.
And they're all, I hate you. And you're looking at them and you're like, no, you don't. I mean, you're thinking this and you recognize this is just a tired child, and you pick them up and you're like,
right.
let's go get a snack and then let's take a nap. And it's easy, right? It's easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when we become bulletproof in those spaces, and I don't think it's possible in every space in our life, because we're going to spend this whole life being transformed, right? Renewing our mind, all of it. Never going to be perfect, but that's within us because we carry Jesus and the Holy Spirit in us. But when we know that, when we become it, when we know it, and then we can walk in it, some of the most amazing things happen relationally. You can have, an employee that was supposed to do a thing and is, not doing it. And we could have, if we're not bulletproof, we might have the initial response of, well, you're not respecting me, or, you're lazy, or you're unprofessional, whatever. We judge. We judge them, we judge ourselves, something. If we're bulletproof and we know that and we can walk in the Spirit, then we go to that person, we say, hey, is everything okay? What's going on? It's not like you to, not have things put together. What's really going on here? And we can do that in our personal relationships too. When, your 17-year-old comes unhitched at you, or your spouse, and you can, step, and this is the thing, people are like, are you kidding me? But you step into that space, you put a hand on the shoulder, and nothing is sticking to you, because it isn't about you, regardless of what they're saying. It's what's in them that's happening. Right.
Right. I had a friend telling me about this situation that she had with her husband. And she said how she normally likes to have his meal prepared when he walks in, the kids, together and ready to go and to greet him, and herself as well. And she said it just was a day for her where nothing went right. All of the things that needed to go wrong or could have gone wrong went wrong. And by the time her husband came home, she was out of sorts. And he could see the mess when he walked in. And because he had not had such a great day, he kind of lashed out at her. And, it was a lot coming at her after her day. So she was telling me how in that moment that she just kind of froze, and, she didn't know what to do, but she knew lashing back at him wasn't the right thing to do. And so she just kind of sat there. And she said later on what ended up happening was, the kids, ended up explaining what went wrong that day, and the defenses just dropped. And so she was really thankful that she didn't react. But I bet internally there was some things that were going on that maybe she hadn't dealt with yet. And so that's a conversation that, she and I have a lot, and where we talk about, what does it look like to not take offense? What does it look like to let that stuff just roll off your back and not react and be available, like what you're saying.
Yeah. So, we think we have to work so hard at it, and the pressure to be perfect at it is really heavy, right? I mean, I have people I work with, they're like, well, it's all up to me, I have to carry the relationship because they're not putting any effort in, and they have these perceptions. It's like, stop thinking about that. stop thinking about, your spouse, and
Mhm.
instead focus on you and what's going on in you. Like, why are you so upset about this? And
Mhm.
there, and it might be a legitimate thing. It might be that, they embezzled money, or you just discovered, you're filing for bankruptcy or something crazy like that. Or you found out that they got fired and they haven't been working for like 4 weeks and they didn't tell you. I mean, crazy big stuff, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
happens. It happens. And so it's all the same stuff though. So and people hate it when I say this, and I didn't like it when I first learned this too, but that is within us. I
Mhm.
really believe that all this stuff out here is just context
Yeah,
for the spiritual experience that we're having.
agree.
Yeah. And okay, I can choose to get really upset, but then I'm basically linking arms with Satan and going, let's play.
Mhm.
Or I can go, no, I'm going to represent Jesus here.
Mm.
And when we're walking in the spirit, we don't even have that conscious thought. It's just love shows up.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I didn't believe this for so many years that I really thought it was only God that could keep no
Mm.
list of wrongs.
Mm.
But that is what it means to be bulletproof and walk in the spirit. It's not about us. We don't take things personally. And so the more I learn about this, I'm doing stuff like on the freeway. I'm going, okay, I'm annoyed. That person cut me off. How come I'm annoyed? And I know I keep talking about this one, but apparently it happens a lot to me as an issue, apparently. But why am I not moving to compassion with that immediately? I want that to be
Yeah.
my instant response instead of annoyance.
Yeah. It's tough. And the traffic analogy I think is actually really great because in life that's how we are. We all are moving in a direction or going to a destination without any real concern for the person in the next lane, the
Mhm.
person behind us, the person in front of us. And I think about when I first became a Christian and how it seemed easier to do that, right? Because I don't know if it was because I didn't have as much coming at me, pressure wise, maybe as you go along in life, pressure can make that more difficult. But yeah, having compassion, I feel like is not as easy as it used to be for me. I have to really work at that and believing the best and, giving people the benefit of the doubt and, sitting with people in their pain, all of that walking in the spirit stuff. When there's a lot of darts coming at you can be tough. And so it calls for us to really know who we are in Christ and calls for us to really spend time with the Lord to really,
Yeah.
really deal with our triggers, know who we are, know our trauma, all of that stuff comes into play. And so, yeah, it's, it should get easier, but I know that at every level there's as they say, a new devil, so it's like,
Yeah. Yeah. The glory to glory thing, right?
yes.
You always keep having to level up in that space. And I love the discussion around meekness in the
Mm,
Bible. The meek in the Beatitudes, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, right? Well, what does that really mean? For years, I thought that meant that as Christians, we're just going to get stepped on. It's that whole agreeable, conscientious thing. Do your best and then let people walk all over you, right? And that's not what it means. If you go back to that time in history, that word, it's not translated in a way that makes sense to us now in contemporary culture, because we think it means roll over. But back then I love this so much because I love horses, but it was there was a phrase called to meek a horse, and it was to
mm,
tame a horse. And it had to do with putting all of that strength under control. And so, and following the cues of the rider, which was, the analogy then becomes following God's cues with us. Right. And so you
mm,
have this, and so when we're talking about being a respected person, we
yeah.
have to know that we really are who we are. We have Jesus and Holy Spirit. That's our identity within
Mhm.
us. And when we forget that, we're not meek. we don't remember the strength that we have within us. We don't move forward in that strength. We come at life from a place of victimhood, afraid that somebody's going to do something to us. And or we come at it from persecution, right? We punch somebody in the face so that they don't mess with us. We're going to get them first. But when you're meek, you have that strength in you and it's under control. It means, I know who I am in this space, and clearly you have an issue. And I'm not saying this to anybody, but I'm like, Lord, we help this person in this moment because, we know it's not about us, even when you language is being thrown at us. So I love all of that. And I think when we understand it, we just behave in ways where we're respected. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think the horse analogy is so perfect, because when I think of a horse, I think 2,000 pounds. I don't know how much do they weigh, like a ton,
Yeah.
Huge animals. They could truly like kill us, right? But they allow themselves to be directed by 100-pounders on their backs, just with bridles. And so I think about that and how much control there has to be with that amount of strength. And so I love that. That's what I picture as well when I think of meekness. Is just really knowing how strong you are, but also having, that control and being led by the Spirit. Easier said than done. But in the Spirit, if we're walking in the Spirit, absolutely possible.
Yeah, absolutely is a great word there. I think about that strength and that power. We have so much power to damage other people. Like horses can trample you, and horses are incredible animals, and they don't intend to harm you most of the time, but sometimes they do.
Right.
And if they want to hurt you, they can, and they will.
Yeah.
And so if that's unbridled fury, if you will, and we let loose with our mouth, we can really, really damage. We become so useful to Satan when we say some of the horrible things that are, we have the power to really injure other people. And I hate that. And I've done it. Me too. But I don't want that. I want to have that. And it's the joy of the Lord is our strength. And so you can have this power and this strength through intimidation and causing fear and just being terrible to get along with, right?
Yeah.
Or you can have influence and be a servant leader and love. And I really think here's evil and here's good, right? I mean, that's how that works. So, and I think that's within us all the time too. So anyway.
Well, this was good today.
Yeah, it was. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. And, if people want to learn more about this, we have a free book on our little booklet thing on our website called 5 Tools to Stop Walking on Eggshells. So if you go to greaterimpact.org, you can grab one of those, just download it. And I don't know if you should print it though, because it's really colorful, but it'll show up and give you more information about all of this. Thanks so much. Have a great day.